So we're going to be talking about the connected leader and what that means, improving results through conversations. I wanted to share with you that, at Fierce, our diverse and very diverse and growing client list has underscored a basic truth, and that is that business is fundamentally an extended conversation with our colleagues, with our customers, with the future that is emerging around us. And unfortunately, many of those conversations fall short of what we had hoped, and some fail rather profoundly. So years ago, my niece, Margot, I think she was about 7 years old, called me and announced that she had just had an apostrophe. And I laughed, and of course what she meant was an epiphany. And so I want to share with you some ideas in the hope that you will enjoy an apostrophe, perhaps even an exclamation point, at the very least a semicolon, about the connection between conversations and our success and our happiness, about the connections between conversations and leadership, and about the connection between conversations and connection. And we'll also get to the how. So let's look at a couple of ideas. The first idea that truly was transformational for me arrived courtesy of Hemingway in The Sun Also Rises. So a character is sitting in a bar and he's been drinking with his friends, and one of his friends says, "So how did you go bankrupt?" And he says, "Gradually and then suddenly." So I have this apostrophe that our careers, our companies, our personal relationships, and indeed our very lives succeed or fail gradually, then suddenly, one conversation at a time. For the 13 years that I led think tanks for CEOs, I can remember very vividly conversations in which on the failing side, the conversation was about how did we lose that customer that counted for 20% of our net profit, or how did I lose a key employee for whom I had great plans? Why is it that the strategy is faltering? And once in a while there'd be a distraught CEO wanting to talk with me privately, how did I manage to lose a 13-year marriage that I was not prepared to lose? And in all cases, the answer was you lost that customer, you lost that employee, you lost your marriage, one failed or missing conversation at a time. But on the flip side, sometimes we'd be celebrating, how did you manage to gain that customer that your competition would really kill for? How is it that you find your team committed to you at a deep level? And how is it that you find your personal relationships absolutely fulfilling, a source of joy for you? And the answer to that is the same thing, one conversation at a time. Those, that you gained that customer, you pulled your team together, you've enriched your relationships, one successful conversation at a time. So we have to understand that conversations, they can provide clarity or confusion. They can invite cross-boundary collaboration, or they can add concertina wire to the walls between well-defended fiefdoms. They can inspire us to tackle our toughest challenges, or they can stop us dead in our tracks, making us wonder why we even bothered to get out of bed this morning. They can be deadly boring, or they can be magnetic, intelligent, impassioned, personal, meaningful, authentic conversations during which we wouldn't willingly trade places with anyone. And I think back to the days of the failure of Enron, followed by so many other bankruptcies that ultimately tanked the U.S. economy. What we were looking at was the suddenly. But all of that happened gradually, one failed or one missing conversation at a time. So let's talk about the fierce part. What is a fierce conversation? Well, it's not one in which I'm going to tell you what I think of you and the horse you rode in on. A fierce conversation is one in which we come out from behind ourselves into our conversation and make it real. And most of us really want to have those real conversations with our colleagues, with our bosses, with our customers, with our family. And yet there's an awful lot of hiding, a lot of being very, very careful. And in my experience, a careful conversation where people withhold what they really think and feel is a failed conversation, because it merely postpones the conversations that want and need to take place. So every fierce conversation has 4 objectives. The first is to interrogate reality. That's super important because no plan survives its collision with reality. And reality has this irritating habit of changing, which complicates our plans and our fantasies about how things were going to go. So we need to get together regularly and say, what has changed since last we met? What is our reality? Is there something we're pretending not to know about our reality? We also want learning to be provoked for everyone in the room. The person standing up in front of the room leading a meeting, the person sitting at the table who hardly ever says anything. We want learning provoked for every single person involved, whether it's a room full of people or just 2 people. We want to tackle our toughest challenges and resolve them. And in the process, we want to enrich our relationships. And in a little bit, I'm going to walk you through a conversation that you can have that will accomplish all 4 of these objectives. So let's go on to transformational idea number 2. Years ago, David Whyte, W-H-Y-T-E, who is a poet originally from Yorkshire, England, gave a keynote talk that I attended in which he said, the young man is often, who's newly married, is often perplexed, frustrated, even a little irritated that this lovely person to whom he has plighted his troth insists on appearing before his face on a regular basis, wanting to talk yet again about the quality of the relationship. And he's wondering, why are we having this conversation again? And David said, well, I'm about age 42, and he smiled because he was 42 and married. He said, if he's been paying attention, it dawns on him, this ongoing conversation that I've been having with my wife is not about the relationship. The conversation is the relationship. And I remember when I heard that, it really landed with me. If those of you who are listening to this now or later, if this lands with you at all, if there may be something to this notion that the conversation is the relationship, then if you and I add yet another topic to the list of things we can't talk about, then all of the possibilities for that relationship become smaller. Until one day you even notice you are making yourself quite small, behaving as if you're just the space around your shoes, engaged in yet another 2-minute, 5-minute conversation that is so empty of meaning it crackles. So this idea is transformational to me because our most valuable currency is not money, it's not IQ, it's not our facility with 3-letter acronyms or our fluency in other languages or our ability to read a P&L statement or build a really cool PowerPoint deck. Our most valuable currency is relationship. It's emotional capital. Several years ago, Daniel Kahneman, who is a psychologist at Princeton, was awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics, which is odd and wonderful because of his discovery that human beings make decisions first for emotional reasons, second for rational. And this is so true. So I just want to tell you a very, very short story. I remember getting a call from a global consulting firm whose name you would all recognize and was told we've got a very expensive trend that we've got to stop. We get called by a prospective client to come in and pitch some solutions for them, and whoever they hire, it's going to be hundreds of millions, in some cases as much as $1 billion. This firm would pull together its best and brightest from around the world on a particular topic, and they would come together and they would work together for several months at great expense, and then they would go and they would pitch their idea to the prospective client, and the client would say thank you very much and hire the other guys. And so they wanted me to help them figure out what they were missing, what were they doing wrong, and it was really quite simple. The customer liked the other guys better. Liked their solutions better? No. Like their pricing better? No. Like their PowerPoint presentations better? No. They like the people better. They actually look forward to working with the people on the competition's team. And the firm's people were very smart, but they lacked warmth and they lacked personality. Meanwhile, the organization's strategy kept stalling and cross-boundary collaboration wasn't happening, and leaders were playing whack-a-mole, micromanaging as opposed to leading. Original thinking was happening elsewhere. Employees had little or no emotional connection to the firm and its customers. And loyal customers were very hard to come by. And relationships were steadily disintegrating, one failed or missing conversation at a time. And at this crossroads, what the leaders of the firm were doing were reviewing their measurable goals, looking at their economic indicators, their cash flow projections, process and procedures, and they were spending staggering amounts of money dedicated to reviewing these basic business processes while their employees and their customers and prospective customers were longing for one galvanizing conversation, just one, and I know this because I've talked with hundreds of them. So if you doubt that your organization is involved in an emotional enterprise, just ask that client who is considering spending considerable dollars with you. So here's some food for thought. If you want to become a great leader, how would you answer that question? Is it to go get an MBA? Is it to make sure you convince everybody that your ideas are brilliant? Is it to develop a fabulous strategy for going forward in your company? Well, some of those things can be useful, but I would suggest that if you want to become a great leader, let's shift our internal kaleidoscope to a different view. If you want to become a great leader, gain the capacity to connect with colleagues and customers at a deep level or lower your aim. Now, I want you to really think about that. That is what differentiates a great leader from an also-ran. So while conventional measures of business success should not be ignored, I propose that it is human connectivity that's the next frontier for exponential growth for individuals and for organizations. And it's the only sustainable competitive edge, and it's more visibly useful than ever before. Because today we are making very different choices about how we live our lives, who we spend our time with, how and where we spend our money. The tiebreaker, the place where you will improve a company's win ratio and increase revenue, actually resides in the area of human connectivity. And it also achieves that elusive employee engagement that we all want, and which is the best indicator of future success. So if you're not still convinced, think Nobel Prize. Kahneman's studies proved beyond any doubt that we behave emotionally first, rationally second. This is not a New Age thing or a cultural thing, or it's not a female thing. It is the human condition, and the implications are stunning, particularly for organizations that have a relationship with their customers based primarily on price and or a relationship with their employees based on an exchange of time and talent for a paycheck. Greatness in individuals and organizations is just not a function of intelligence. There's plenty of IQ out there. It is a function of emotional capital, the ability to connect with people on a human level. And each of us accumulates or loses that emotional capital, building relationships that we enjoy or endure with colleagues, with bosses, with customers, and other partners, one conversation at a time. And without relationship, we have no voltage. So really, the first company in any industry that significantly improves its human connectivity skills will take and hold the field, because we are emotional beings engaged in emotional enterprises, and without that emotional impetus, we withhold our best efforts. We drag our feet, we delay decisions, we walk away altogether. The competition offers a better price and loyal customers leave. Talented, unengaged employees learn of a work environment in which they sense they'll be happier, and they too will be gone, even if they must take lower salaries, pay higher medical deductibles, and endure longer commutes. This is not hypothetical. The lack of meaningful connection with coworkers and customers is costing companies billions annually. Even Einstein knew this. He said we must take care not to make the intellect our God. It has, of course, powerful muscles, but no personality. It cannot lead, it can only serve. I think back to examples of the intellect trying to lead and failing. Back in 2003, Howell Raines was fired from his post as managing editor of the New York Times, and he had every managerial advantage and a brilliant strategy, but he lost the newsroom. He failed to win the hearts and minds of the staff, without which he could not hope to implement his change strategy. In 2007, Bob Nardelli was dismissed from his position as CEO of Home Depot, and he had arrived with impeccable credentials and achieved dazzling financials, but he failed to connect with the shareholders and deal makers and legislators and regulators and non-governmental organizations who wanted to have a say in how the company was run and on whom the company's continued success depended. Of course, when I share this with you, I can't help but think about our Congress in the U.S., which has been appalling and a source of great embarrassment to everybody. So the problem for Raines and Nardelli and so many other brilliant individuals was that reason did not and never does prevail. Raines and Nardelli alienated people so that their reasoned arguments fell on deaf ears. I feel for them, and smart, well-intentioned leaders like them, because nowhere in their education have they been taught to focus on the human side of their enterprise. So building high-performing, enduring, profitable relationships with employees and customers requires that we explore, embrace, and ultimately rely on emotion in work that is, at the end of the day, deeply human. I have met smart, empty people. You have too. You and I have also met smart, open-hearted people who are campfires around which we would gladly gather. So which would you rather commit to at a deep level? Whom would you like to work alongside? The problem is we don't know how, and most of the time when I mention the importance of connectivity, I think people envision the hazard involved in putting one wet hand on the anode while the other reaches for the cathode. And of course, it can be like that if we don't know what we're doing. So what are we talking about? Well, just for starters, what does connect mean? Our interactions are natural, meaningful, free. You feel you can talk with people without a filter. You want to talk with them, and you talk as equals. It's easy to trust and share things with them, including competing perspectives. You understand them, encourage them, care about how they're doing, bring out the best in each other. Each interaction brings you closer. And if you ask, you don't have a connection with someone. So there's one more idea that's in the way, and then I want to go into the how. And this is the third transformational idea, which is that all conversations are with myself. And sometimes they involve other people. So to help you understand what I mean by this is think about all the times that you have been in a meeting and you leave the meeting only to discover that apparently you and everybody else were in the same different meeting. or you send a perfectly innocent email and discover to your dismay that someone on the receiving end of it read it entirely differently and is very upset or angry. And now you have to have a conversation to clean up a problem that never even existed from your point of view. Thornton Wilder said there's nothing like eavesdropping to show you that the world outside your head is different from the world inside your head. So let's move into what do you do with all this? What would be a way that you could connect at a deep level with people in your organization and also get really important and useful work done? So think about your organization and where you live in it. This little graph shows a global organization. You know, you've got your board, your CEO, you've got your COO, CFO, et cetera, and all around the world in all the different departments. Well, just think about if the CEO asked every single person in this company to advise him or her, where do you feel we should really focus our somewhat limited resources in 2016? How many different answers would you get? So clearly, the head of finance and accounting in North America would answer that one way. Somebody in corporate America and corporate marketing in Europe would answer it another way. Somebody in HR in Asia, somebody in information technology in South America, your CIO, your CMO, your CFO, your CLO, everybody would have an entirely different answer. And when you think, well, who's right? They're all right in a way. And I remember years ago working with Madeleine Albright, and somebody in the audience asked her, if you had all of the world leaders here sitting at your feet and you could give them one piece of advice, but only one piece of advice, what would you advise them? And she said, I would advise them that what matters anywhere matters everywhere. And boy, I agree. I mean, what matters anywhere in your organization matters everywhere, or should. In every organization, large or small, there are three basic units. In no particular order, there's the company, there are divisions of the company, large and small, geographical, functional, and the employees, the individual contributors who come in every shape, size, and color. Each unit, company, divisions, employees is its own entity, unique in all the world, deserving of recognition, of celebration, of guidance, of support, with its own goals and its own pack to carry, its destination clear or unfolding, and all are connected and all are dependent on one another, affecting one another with every drawn breath, with every missed deadline, with every bit of work won, every new initiative. And so fail to engage one of us and you lose all of us. The challenge is to impart this understanding across the organization. And to do that, we must expand the idea of inclusion beyond the usual suspects and expand the idea of engagement beyond that tired old phrase, inspirational leadership, as if reciting the mission statement or giving an inspiring pep talk is going to do the trick. So what do we do? Well, think about the company as if it were a beach ball. Trying to advance my slide and not having any luck. Let me try it here. Okay. So this is our model for a team conversation, and it comes straight from my years of running think tanks with CEOs, where a CEO would have a problem to solve, a decision to make, a strategy to design, an opportunity to evaluate, and it was very important to get it right. And he or she would bring it to the peers in the room for help. And so let's going back to your own company. If you think of your company as this giant beach ball, and every single person in the company, including you, is standing on a different colored stripe on your corporate beach ball and is experiencing your company from that perspective. So if you were to ask who owns the truth about what color your company is, well, the answer is Nobody owns the whole truth, and everybody owns a piece of the truth. And by the way, that dotted line person is the person who tends to come to meetings and not say very much. So we'll deal with that person here in a minute. But let me talk about the objectives of a team conversation. The first is to deepen yours and others' understanding of and appreciation for differing, often competing views of reality. You will structure high levels of alignment, collaboration, and partnership, not only within your own team, but across the organization. And very importantly, you will make the best possible decisions for your organization. Because I'll tell you, there's nothing more dangerous than an idea when it's the only one you have. So you really need to vet your ideas. So first, let's say you are going to call a meeting. You do have a problem to solve or a strategy to design, whatever it is, and you really do want input. So you need to fill out what we call the beach ball preparation form, and you have to fill in all the answers to this. The issue is, so what is the issue? And sometimes that is the toughest thing, because very often when we start out, we think, well, this is the issue, and as we explore further, we realize, actually that is not the real issue. The real issue is over here. So you need to do some work to clarify what is the issue. And then secondly, why is this significant? In other words, what's at stake for us to gain or lose around this issue and getting this right? What would be the ideal outcome? What's the relevant background information that everybody at the table needs to understand? What have I done up to this point? What options am I considering? And if I had to make a decision right now without your input, this is the decision I would make for these reasons. Now, here's what I need from you. I need you to push back. I need, and this is what you're going to say to the group. So what you do is you think about, based on the issue, whose perspective would be important to invite to this beach ball meeting that you're going to hold. I'm not saying disinvite the usual suspects, but who else? Who is in another part of the company whose perspective would be very useful? Who's going to have to implement whatever decision comes out of this? Who's going to be on the receiving end of this decision, the customer, so to speak, of this decision? And by the way, sometimes it's wonderful to get a literal customer in the room for conversations like this. You can learn an awful lot that you didn't know when you have customers in the room. But, who needs to be there? There was a story about Jack Welch in one of his factories, and he was in the factory, and everybody was standing in the factory, and he was saying, we've got this problem. And a guy in the back in a pair of overalls raised up his hand and said, well, here's what I've been suggesting. And it was a great idea. And Jack Welch thanked him for the idea. And the guy said, all these years you've been paying for our hands, you could have had our heads and our hearts for free. So I think we forget who would be useful, very important to involve in this conversation. So you send out invitations to them. You tell them what the topic is. You tell them that you want them to come prepared to share their perspective. So now you're in the meeting. And you start the meeting off by thanking everyone for coming. And then you talk through the beach ball preparation form to quickly focus attention and resources on the topic. If you want to, you can make copies of it and hand them out. And you tell your team members that you want to hear their perspectives. And I want to say a little bit more about that. Somebody who's really great at this is Robert Redford at Sundance. When he calls a meeting, and he holds beach ball meetings, and he invites sometimes somebody off the street into a meeting, very creative thinking, he'll often say, I really hope to be different when this conversation is over. And I am inviting you to influence me. Now, no wonder people would follow him anywhere. It's a miraculous an unfortunately all too rare experience where somebody says, I'm really inviting you to influence me, and I do hope to have my own learning provoked here. I mean, my thinking has not been expanded in any way as a result of our time together, then what's the point? So you tell your team members, look, I've just laid out very clearly, completely transparently, where my head is, where I'm thinking, what I would do, and why, if I didn't have your input. Now, tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what you're seeing that I'm not seeing. If I'm saying I think we should turn right and you think we should go left, say so. This is your opportunity to do this. And then as you get started, you make sure that you hear from each person. And let me just, remember that dotted line person who doesn't say anything? As you hear from everyone, pay attention to who has not yet weighed in on the topic. And at some point, call on them and say, Stephanie, we haven't heard your point of view. And there are only two unacceptable answers. If Stephanie says, well, I don't really know, what I think we should do, then I would like for you to say, well, what would it be if you did know? And just wait. Let silence do some heavy lifting. Or if Stephanie says, well, Jack pretty much expressed my point of view, so I don't have anything to add, I would want you to say, well, what would you add if you did have something to add? So you're teaching people in this meeting that this is where everybody needs to come prepared to disclose what they're really thinking and feeling. Another word of advice before I go down any further down this list. When you say, I really want you guys to push back, I want you to challenge my thinking, tell me what you're seeing that I'm not seeing, it may be very quiet for a few seconds while people decide, is this the hill on which I'm prepared to die? Or, what's going on here? Is this a trick question? Or is it really safe? All those kinds of things that go through people's minds. But eventually, if you just wait it out, someone will say, well, okay, you asked, so I'm a little concerned about, and they just stuck their toe in the water. And that's where we tend to blow it off. We tend to jump right in and say, yes, I hear you, but, and we jump right back in and defend our point of view. And we've just communicated, I wasn't really asking, or you're wrong, or that was not a career-enhancing response on your part. And it will go very quiet, and you're in no immediate danger of anybody showing up authentically after that. So you have to say, no matter what somebody says, even if you, and especially if you see it very differently, you need to say something like, thank you, say more about that, please, and mean it. So you hear from every single team member, and then you say, all right, discussion's over. I want you to write down, given everything we've just explored together, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? And, I don't want a whole long list. Give me your best possible advice, just one or two bullets, no essays. And I want you to write your name on it because in a minute we're going to go around the room and we're going to hear from everybody. And you wait until everybody's written, and then you say, okay, Sally, what have you got? And Sally says, well, I think we should blah, 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 blah. And you say, thank you. Jack, what do you have? Well, I wrote blah, 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 blah. Thank you. Maria, what do you have? Blah, 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 blah. Thank you. And you keep going. You don't go back into conversation. You just say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you're listening, and you're not taking notes. Nobody is taking notes during this meeting. You are looking into each other's baby blues, greens, browns, hazels. And when you've gone around the table, you say, let me tell you what I've heard you say. And you summarize. It doesn't have to be verbatim, but you say, these are the key points I've heard. Have I missed anything essential? So they have a chance to go back in and say, well, yeah, remember Tom suggested that we so-and-so. Ah, yes, right, thank you. And then you tell them, okay, here's where I am. I want to absorb all of this. I want you to hand me your recommendations. I want to get back with a couple of you one-on-one to go deeper into some of your thoughts about this. I want to run this by my boss, whatever it is. And sometimes you might say, well, I know for sure one thing I am going to do that you suggested, and that would be this. And let them know, but usually you do need some time to think about what else you're going to do. So you let them, you get back to them. You let them know the results of your decision and or of your next steps. This is the beach ball conversation. This is a way to interrogate multiple competing realities, which provokes learning for everyone in the room, which tackles and resolves your toughest challenges and, in the process, enriches relationships. This is the first conversation model that we teach when somebody goes through Fierce Conversations training, because it is so powerful, and it gets so much done. And underlying all of this, there is this human connectivity, because when people are sitting in a room around a table, everybody's told, don't take notes, just listen. I want to hear from every single person here. Just listen intently to what everybody's saying. People will start to really see one another and hear one another in ways they might not have before. And their own internal kaleidoscopes will begin to shift a little bit, as will yours if you're the person standing up in front of the room. I can't tell you how many times I've been positive that I had this brilliant idea, only to have learned that it's far short of brilliant. And without the team and without the competing perspectives and the courage and the skill to challenge one another without being upset about it, we just wouldn't have arrived at the great decisions that we've arrived at. So I want to give you a little bit of food for thought, and then take any questions, comments that you have in our remaining time. So ask yourself a few questions. The most important conversation I'll ever have is the one that I have with myself. So ask yourself, what are my goals when I talk with people? Is my goal to get it right or to be right? And I have to say that a fierce leader wants to get it right, not be right. And a fierce leader knows that he or she does not have all of the answers and isn't required to have all of the answers. A fierce leader simply knows how to have the conversations in which the answers, which are in the room, emerge and bring us towards that innovation and that execution muscle that we're wanting. Ask yourself, how do I respond when people disagree with me? Do I invite them to say more, or do I defend my point of view? Ask yourself, if I were guaranteed honest answers to 3 questions, what 3 people would I ask, and what would I ask them? What has been the economical, emotional, and intellectual cost to my organization of not identifying and tackling the real issues? And what's been the cost to me? How often do I recall members of my team or staff putting their real concerns on the table in an attempt to make the conversation genuine? When was the last time I said what I really thought and felt? What conversation has my name on it? Who is it with? What is the topic? When will I have it? Who deserves my praise? Who deserves my apology? And finally, if all of my conversations with the most important people in my life, including my family members, successfully interrogated reality, provoked learning, tackled our tough challenges, and enriched our relationships, what difference could that make to the quality of my life? And after you've had that conversation with yourself, pull a team of people together and ask them, what's the most important thing we should be talking about? What do we believe is impossible for us to do that if it were possible would change everything? If nothing changes around this issue or that issue, what's likely to occur? If you could give me the best piece of advice, what would you advise me? So as I conclude this, I want you to think about this thought that while no single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a career or a company or a relationship or a life, any single conversation can. I was recently in Kenya with my family, and once again, because I've been there before, once again I saw this beautiful greeting in the Masai Mara, where two people come across one another on the path, and the first person to speak says, "Sawubona," which means "I see you." And the answer is "Sikona," which means "I am here." And it is as if until you see me, I do not exist. So please understand that everywhere people are hungry to connect, hungry to be seen and known as the unique individuals that they are. And this has an immediate and powerful impact on how we design business strategies and market our products and services, and ultimately on whether our businesses succeed or fail. At Fierce, our mission is to transform the conversations central to our clients' success. It's a skill set, it's a mindset, it's a strategy for getting things done. So a fierce leader commits to a way of life that over time becomes about we, not me, about one another, about what's best for the common good, about knocking down the walls that separate us, about not knowing the answers but finding the answers, not having a business conversation but a human one. So I hope that you will focus on creating consistent, enduring connections everywhere you go. And the final slide would say that this is what we teach. So the team conversations that I just mentioned briefly to you, coaching, one-on-one conversations, delegation, feedback, confrontation, accountability, generational, negotiation, and our work in the schools, our field guide for teachers. So thank you so very much for your attention, and I am quite happy to now actually have a conversation with some of you if possible.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. This has been a fantastic presentation, and I want to thank you and your team for making this possible for all of our members. I would also like to make the call to our members to type in your questions. We look forward to engaging in conversation over the next few minutes that we have available. So Susan, let's get that conversation started, and I'm happy to be the sort of a proxy between you and our members. And so first off, we have a question from Ella, and Ella wants to know if you might be able to mention some additional barriers to connectivity and conversations other than perhaps insecurities and vulnerabilities. Are there anything else that might prohibit those types of connective conversations from happening?
Well, a lot of it has to do with our beliefs that are really in the way. For a long time, we just have not even thought of connectivity as something that was worthy of our strategy, that was really a strategy. We thought of it as a soft skill, as something that maybe they do in HR on Friday afternoons, and we just didn't understand that the health of our organization, our culture, our relationships with our customers, all has a crying need for this skill and connectivity. So we haven't been taught how to do it. We don't know how. So I think that's the main reason is that people don't know how. I mean, even the people that say, I would like to have conversations in which I connected with people at a deeper level. I really would like to have those, but I have no idea how to go about that. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons why we're working with so many companies all over the world to learn how to do that. Whether it's how do you have the kind of team meeting that I just discussed, how do you have a one-to-one meeting with someone that really helps them think out loud through the challenges on their plate and raises their own level of accountability? How do you give feedback in a way that it really lands with people? And it certainly isn't the annual anonymous feedback report that we all dread and loathe. It's face to face, but people need to learn, how do I give feedback? Even including praise. People don't know how to. They say things like, gee, you did a good job, but they don't say, let me tell you what it was specifically that you just did in the meeting that blew my socks off, that I thought was absolutely wonderful. Or let me tell you about how you worked with that customer that was not happy with us in a way that was fabulous to witness, and I'm so appreciative of you. We don't even know how to do that, and much less how to confront when we've got someone who has a behavior issue or an attitude issue that has really become a problem. So the biggest barrier around connection is we don't know how. So that's why Fierce exists. We'll show you how. We'll show you how to do this. And I think the insecurities fall away once you see that it's really not that hard. It really isn't. And maybe it's going to take me a little bit of courage the very first time I'm in a meeting and I want to say something that might not be well received by the leaders, but I feel strongly about it. If you learn how to put your contrary view on the table that is respectful and helpful and smart and full of heart, you can get away with it. So it's a matter of gaining the skill and being courageous in the beginning, and then you'll find out later on that you don't have to be courageous because people will welcome it. There's something within us that responds at a deep level to those who level with us, who don't suggest our compromises to us. And our respect level and our trust level goes way up when we're around somebody like that.
Absolutely. So, Susan, first, before I move on to the next question, I wanted to pass along some positive feedback from one of our members, Sharon, who just wanted to thank you for the work that you do, and it's inspiring, and so it's someone who listens often. And then we have another question come in. This is from Dan, and I think that this is a really interesting concept, I think, and that is how do you deal with some of the more immediate conversations within an institution that have been lingering for years, especially if there are several people for whom that may need to happen? So how do you chip away at some of those institutional bad habits? Just with a single conversation, Susan, or do you have to have a strategic approach to sort of get buy-in? And what would you recommend when you're trying to affect change for something that's been going on for a very long time?
Well, I wish that I was sitting here with Dan in his office or in my office, and I could say, tell me about the situation, because I don't really know whether it's totally a cultural thing or an implementation misstep, or whether it is an individual who has a behavior or an attitude or performance issue that is really causing problems. And depending on what it is, it would require a different approach. I think if there's something that's been going on for a long, long, long time that you feel isn't working, the first thing to do would be to go to your boss and to make a case for it. And I think you could even use the beach ball preparation forum as a way to sort of build your pitch. Although there's another model that we teach in the class that might be even more useful. But you could say, look, I want to talk with you about X. I think this is an issue, and here's why it is significant, and here are the prices we are paying for this. And I can't imagine that you or anybody else wants us to continue paying those prices. And if nothing changes, here's what's likely to occur. And that's not a good scenario. So I think what would be ideal for us would be if we could fill in the blank. And I certainly have some suggestions and some requests, and I think it would be good to call together some other individuals whose input could be very useful, because this issue is costing us. Maybe it's costing us financially, it's costing us culturally, emotionally, intellectually. We don't have the execution muscle that we need around this. And execution muscle is hugely important. And that's, like getting it done right, getting it done on time or early, getting it done at cost or less, getting it done before the competition. I mean, getting it done. And if we're not getting it done because of something that is in the way, whether it is an individual or it is a process, whatever it is, we need to go after that. So it starts with preparing your own sort of making your case to your boss and making it really compelling, very clear, very short, concise, clear, and compelling. And if you don't get anywhere there, then you go over his or her head and make the case again, or you rethink it, or what I don't want people to do is triangulate. That's where person A bonds with person B over their mutual loathing of person C. We've got to talk directly to one another about what's working and what isn't working, rather than talking about people or about issues where the people we're talking to can't do anything about it or don't have any intention of doing anything about it. So, it does boil down to the progress of our companies depends in a very real sense on our progress as individuals right now. It'd be great if the leaders all transformed into people who understood the value of differing perspectives and understood a whole new approach to building execution muscle and engaging their employees. But, don't hold your breath. That might not happen. So it starts with you. It starts with you, because each one of us is a walking hologram of, the culture. And anytime any one of us walks into a room or participates in a meeting or gets on a phone or sends an email, we are reinforcing things that are healthy or not healthy for our organization.
Absolutely, Susan. I think I'll wrap this up with maybe one observation. And you talk about the connectivity and how really what we're trying to do is bridge that connection between the leadership and its employees. And I am just curious if, in your estimation, that it's meeting in the middle, and that managers are really kind of in a very important role to be able to sort of spread that connective sort of cultural values. So I know that from an HCI point of view, we are very much in favor of trying to train managers to be able to have those types of coaching conversations, and instead of having those anonymous feedback that you mentioned when it comes to performance conversations, that it's something that's ongoing and concurrent. So just maybe you could wrap things up by talking a little bit about how that can be trickled down from the top. It can come bubbling up from the base of the organization, and maybe that managers are very important in order to be able to sort of matriculate that cultural change of conversations being the focal point of an organization.
Managers are very important. I have seen. I've seen people in a support role end up changing the entire culture of a huge organization because of what they themselves were modeling and what they were asking for. And certainly managers are important. Once you've landed on your strategy, which obviously you're going to revisit frequently because of the fact that reality tends to shift. Once you've landed on your strategy and you're into implementation, what I've always said is that my job as a leader, and those of everybody who's in a leadership role in my company and your company, our job is to take care of our employees. Their job is to take care of our customers. And the customer's job, so to speak, is to take care of our bottom line. And so each one of us touches all of these areas ultimately. The way I interact with our employees absolutely affects how they're going to interact with one another and with our customers. And the way they interact with our customers affects what's going to happen with our top line and our bottom line. And so this is a very pragmatic approach, but it can start anywhere with anyone. You don't get stuck in that idea that if he or she would be that way, then I would be different. Or if the culture would be this way, then things would be better. It is up to each of us as individuals to model what it is that we want and to gain the skill and get better at it and to notice, none of us are perfect. I fall off the wagon once in a while with the Fierce principles and say, I made a mistake, let me try that again. It is a way of life that's worth the effort. So I'm really hoping that you did get the connection between conversations and leadership, between conversations and connection, and the role of connection in the success of your organization at every level.
Absolutely, Susan. So thank you so much. We have run out of time, and I encourage our members to visit fierceinc.com to learn more. And I will wrap this up with a big thank you to Susan Scott and Fierce for making this webcast possible. I'd be remiss, however, if I didn't extend the biggest thank you of all to each and every one of our HCI members who've taken the time out of their day to spend with us today. We look forward to seeing you all on another webcast soon. Enjoy the rest of the day, folks. Make it a good one.